And I call this meeting to order. Ms. Carlson, do you have a motion?
I do. I move that the Albemarle County Public School Board go into a closed meeting as authorized by the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia under subsection 1 for the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Carlson, second by Mr. Alcaro, that we move into closed session according to the ordinances that she cited. Any discussion? If not, Ms. Johnston.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Page.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, we will go into closed session. So see you there in a little bit. Good evening. It is now 6:30 and I call this November 11th meeting of the Albemarle County School Board to order. Ms. Carlson, do you have a motion?
I do. I move that the board certify by recorded vote that to the best of each board member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion authorizing the closed meeting were heard, discussed, are considered in the closed meeting.
Is that a second? Okay, moved by Ms. Carlson, second by Ms. Lee, that we certify that the only thing that was discussed in the closed meeting was what was initially said to be in the resolution that started the meeting. So Ms. Johnston, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Mr. Page.
Yes,
Motion carried.
thank you. We will have a moment of silence at this time. Thank you. Because of the COVID pandemic, we are required to read this into our minutes for each of our meetings. The minutes of this meeting should reflect that this meeting is being held electronically pursuant to Virginia state law and Albemarle County ordinance because the COVID-19 pandemic makes it impracticable and unsafe to assemble a quorum physically in a single location. The meeting is being communicated to the public electronically through Zoom and streamed live on the Albemarle County Public Schools website. And public comment may be offered through the Zoom waiting room feature in accordance in accordance with the school board's protocol or by written submission. I will now introduce the members of our board. Dr. Kate Acuff,
Kate Acuff, Jack Jewett District.
Mr. John O. Alcaro,
John O. Alcaro at large.
Ms. Katrina Carlson,
Katrina Carlson, Rio District.
Ms. Judy Lee,
Judy Lee, Rivanna District.
Mr. Dave Oberg,
Dave Oberg, Whitehall Magisterial District.
Ms. Ellen Osborne.
Ellen Osborne, Scottsville District.
I'm Graham Page, Samuel Miller District, and our student rep is Mr. David Entropius.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Alcaro, second by Ms. Osborne, that we approve the agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Ms. Johnston,
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Page.
yes,
Motion carried.
motion carries. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Alcaro, second by Ms. Osborne, that we approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, may I ask that we, just for the purpose of discussion, pull the calendaring change?
Okay. All right, so you want to withdraw the item 3.4, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Are we ready to vote on that motion with the understanding that we are removing item 3.4 for discussion?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Johnston,
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Page.
yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. All right, we did move item 3.4 to be discussed at this point. So Mr. Oberg,
We've had a few questions from members of the public as to why we're doing this, and I just think it would behoove us to address the issue. I very much am in favor of it, but I think we should talk about why it's necessary, why we think it's necessary. I don't know if Dr. Haas could address that, or Dr. Collins, or
yes. Dr. Haas, could you address that issue?
I will be happy to, Mr. Page. Thank you. Recognizing that we have what we term workforce instability at this point, many unfilled positions in the school system, the extra time, effort, and going above and beyond the call of duty for our classroom teachers as well as our support staff. We're looking at providing extra time in the spring for our teachers, for our classified staff, for our teachers to have time to get some work done that they need to catch up on, to grade assessments, to make plans for the next day, and be able to complete that during work time, because a great deal of their planning time is being taken up right now, covering for other teachers when they need to be out, and just helping students recover at a greater rate than they may normally do. And with our classified staff, we've identified a need for them to have professional development in areas where they're supporting teachers, or in the case of our nurses, to catch up on mitigation work that they're doing. So we felt that it would be a good idea to provide those work days. We also felt it would be good to remove some of the half days that we had put in place earlier in the year, because We recognize that our attendance on those days is an anomaly when compared to other days of the school week that are full days. So by combining those PLC days with some work time and moving them to Fridays, it would be more convenient for our families to be able to deal with that. And I'd say the last part is that we really wanted to provide some work-related relief for our employees, but to not do it now, to not do it right now and give parents short notice. So we decided to go ahead and make those plans for the second semester so that all of our families would have plenty of notice about the changes. Those were our thoughts.
Dr. Haas, it's also the case that we still have a very long school year. I mean, the seat time for our students is not below the state requirements at all.
And that's correct. And I did the other day, just to validate that thinking and the facts behind it, I did check in with Dr. McLaughlin. And because we added 2 school days to the beginning of the calendar to make up for the half days, which are still school days that we were having later, right now, with the changes that we're making, it's really just a net reduction, I think, of 3 school days altogether for students and families. So I think we're still well within the hour requirements. If we run into inclement weather where we start to track long periods of time where we're out of school, then what we said in the initial work that we put before the board was that we would begin, like if we had too many inclement weather days and we felt we needed to have some more school days, we'd begin by removing the May 20th work day and then work our way back so that we can make up for that time.
Thank you, Dr. Haas, for that explanation.
And I think one of the questions that someone asked publicly was, what is encumbered time and why do we have to unencumber it? And I can tell you that having worked with teachers for a very long time, one of the dangers is that when you have planning time, specifically planning time, somebody will schedule a meeting. And so you don't actually get that planning time to do the work you're trying to do. And so when we say that it's unencumbered, it means that that is time that no one can say, okay, well, you have this time, so now we're going to do a meeting. It's to protect the purpose of the time off. And it's not time off, it's time to work. But
Thank you,
thank
Mr.
you
Oberg.
for that explanation, Dr. Haas. I would move that we approve the change to the calendar.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Oberg, second by Mr. Alcaro, that we approve item 3.4 that was in the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Ms. Johnston.
Ms. Coulson,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes,
motion carried.
thank you. Are there any announcements to be made at this time?
I would just say, Mr. Page, as the board knows, I do go out and visit a school every Thursday. And today I was out at Hollymead Elementary School. I want to thank Dr. Domer and his staff for welcoming me. I just had such a great time with Ms. Foster's 3rd grade art class. She's doing a great job. And also Ms. McGee's 2nd grade class. I got to sit in with them and just wonderful teaching and learning going on. Recognizing it's only one school, I want to say that this great work that they're doing typifies the outstanding work that takes place in all of our schools every day. And I'm really proud of our teachers and our support staff. I do want to recognize that we do have principals here tonight that have joined the board meeting. If y'all want to turn on your cameras just for a second so that everybody can see you. We do have Kristen Williams, who's the principal of Woodbrook Elementary School. We also have Beth Costa, principal of Henley Middle School, and Dara Bonham, principal of Albemarle High School. I do want to check for one more principal that I think was going to be here, but I don't see her. So, but I really want to welcome these principals to the meeting. it's great to have you, and we really appreciate you being here, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Dr. Haas, and welcome to Ms. Williams, Dr. Costa, and Mr. Bonham to our meeting. We're really glad to have you here, and thank you for all that you do. Are there any other announcements? If
Just
not-
last week,
Oh, yeah, okay, Dr. Acuff.
just last week, I attended an event that was sponsored by 3 of our local environmental groups, as well as Bluebird buses. And we got to tour an electric bus, and we got all kinds of information about how efficient they were. And it looked mighty nice, I have to say. And I guess we will be getting our 2 buses for the next school year. But one of the pieces of information, which Jim Foley was there, so I'm sure he'll act on, was that there's state money now available, not only for electric bus purchase, even if we just got some money, but also for electric bus infrastructure. So that was I did not ride on the bus, but I heard it was lovely.
Thank you, Dr. Acuff. Today being Veterans Day, we have sort of a special announcement in recognition. At the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, World War I, the war to end all wars, officially came to an end. And while regrettably not all wars ended, that moment did signal the beginning of a very important event in the history of our nation. From that moment on, every November 11th became a time for a grateful nation to thank the men and women who down through our history have lifted us all up by their brave, courageous, and selfless devotion to our country's highest values. This evening, we join in thanking our veterans, especially our active duty soldiers, for their service to us. Among those who most gain from this service is anyone who cherishes the right of every person in the United States to a public education, and to enter through the doors of equal opportunity in order to be as great as the promise of their potential. But there is a strong connection between public schools and public prosperity. We are responsible for preparing children to be future contributors to our nation, to our communities, and to our families. Our ability to achieve this high purpose is strengthened by our veterans. They have made it possible for public schools to exist in truth, honesty, and integrity, improving our ability to plan for and achieve equity and excellence, make it possible for school boards to be elected representatives of our communities, empower the voice of our parents and students, and teachers to be respected and valued, and to share in making public education better. This goal is the responsibility of each of us, but the living, breathing, dynamic democracy that makes achievement of this goal possible is a gift from our veterans. Where school and service meet together, as in our junior Reserve Officer Training Corps program at Monticello High School, our students gain lifelong skills in leadership, respect, honor, teamwork, and fitness. It's estimated that nearly 500 of our students, and likely more than that, are from families that have an affiliation with military service. Earlier today, Meriwether Lewis Elementary School held an outdoor concert and ceremony to honor the veterans in their school community. There were 55 veterans who joined the event. Part of the school's celebration of Veterans Day was to ask students to write to a veteran serving overseas. One third grader wrote, "Thank you so much. I hope you stay safe. I had a relative in World War I, and my grandpa used to jump out of helicopters into shark-infested waters. Just keep doing what you are doing and stay safe." Another said, "My grandfather was in the military. He survived and lived to be 104. I hope you come home safely. I bet it is scary to go to war. I'm amazed you risked your life for us." All of the letters expressed similar gratitude, but my favorite may have been this one. "We can't wait until you come home. I'm in the 3rd grade. Thank you for protecting us. My dog's name is Zoe. She loves people, and she probably will like you too." All of the letters, cards, and artwork from Meriwether Lewis will be delivered to Blue Star families of Central Virginia. and will be in packages sent to servicemen and women from Virginia who are deployed all over the world. I'd like to close by quoting President Biden, who proclaimed today, "For generations, millions of Americans have answered the call to serve, taking the sacred oath to defend and preserve our nation's ideals of liberty and democracy. These patriots represent the best of us. On Veterans Day, we honor their service, dedication, and valor, and are forever grateful for their service. And we are forever grateful to our veterans. So happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans. We will now have a special announcement by Dr. Harrison about the partnership with the Virginia Tribal Education Consortium. Dr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Page, and a good evening to everyone. As Mr. Page said, I am Bernard Hairston, your Assistant Superintendent for School and Community Empowerment. I'd like to just share with you that the Office of Community Engagement has been cultivating a partnership with the Virginia Tribal Education Consortium for more than a year. This partnership serves as an example of operationalizing our goal 2 of the newly adopted strategic plan to affirm and empower the voices of our entire community. In addition, this partnership addresses our long-term goal of developing a culturally responsive environment that respects and champions the diversity of the life experiences of our students, our staff, and our families. We have a special guest with us this evening. He is Ken Adams, the Executive Director of the Virginia Tribal Education Consortium. Ken is also a member of the Virginia Department of Education's newly appointed Culturally Relevant and Inclusive Practices Committee that was created by the General Assembly in 2020. This committee is responsible for defining culturally responsive education in Virginia, redesigning professional development for the state, as well reviewing history standards. So we have with us Emeritus Chief Ken Adams, and he will share some of his thoughts about the significance of this partnership. Chief?
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Harrison, and thank to everyone on the school board for having me here this evening. I am so pleased to be here, and I would like to discuss this partnership agreement between the Virginia Tribal Education Consortium, commonly known as VTEC, and Albemarle County Public Schools. This partnership will allow VTEC and Albemarle County Public Schools to work together toward the recruitment and retention of staff for supporting Virginia Indian students and delivering culturally relevant professional development training. Also, we will be able to review and make recommendations to curriculum content that is considered respectful to promote accurate and inclusive representation of Native American and Virginia Indian identities and perspectives. Let me explain how VTEC was formed. In 2018, 7 Virginia Indian tribes received federal recognition from the United States Congress. That means that we have a direct one-on-one relationship with the government of the United States. That recognition provided these 7 tribes with access to housing assistance, healthcare through Indian Health Services, and education resources through the Office of Indian Education. Resources through the Office of Indian Education has provided funding which allowed VTEC to become a tribal education agency representing the 7 federally recognized tribes. Forming this consortium for education for Native tribes is the first of its kind in the United States, and we're very proud of that. The history of education for Virginia Indians is rampant with exclusionary practices. Most of my older brothers and sisters actually had to leave the Commonwealth to get a high school education, some going as far away as Oklahoma and Michigan when they're only 14 and 15 years old. This process was heartbreaking for many Virginia Indian families, and we are still recovering. In 1965, I, along with one other Upper Mattaponi citizen, were the first two graduates of a public high school in King William County. Prior to that, I had attended Sharon Indian School, which was the home for the Upper Mattaponi Indian education. No one ever graduated from Sharon Indian School, as teachers could not provide enough high school education. Most of the other 7 tribes also had schools of their own. Sharon Indian School building is still in existence and is the only public Indian school that's still in existence in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's not used as a school, but it's still in existence. Finally, after years of struggling, we have access to education resources we could only dream of. And now we are able to form partnerships with school districts such as Albemarle, in which Virginia Indians will have a stronger say in education for Indian students. This is a major step towards Indians in Virginia gaining equity in education. That being said, it is truly an honor and a privilege to be here this evening to discuss this partnership agreement. Since VTech was formed, we now working to build a capacity through a state tribal education partnership. We have developed a strong relationship with the Virginia Department of Education and now wish to develop relationships with school districts with significant Native populations, such as Albemarle County. The displacement of Native students across the nation has caused lasting harm in many Indian communities across the United States. I have personally listened to many Indians talk about being displaced from their homes, and my family being one of those, and sent to Indian boarding schools across the country. We cannot repair that trauma, but we can certainly improve education outcomes for Virginia Indian students. That is one of the reasons why this partnership agreement is so important. With that said, I look forward to working with Albemarle County Public Schools as partners for Virginia Indian education, and I'm so pleased to have this privilege to talk to you about that. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I'd like to introduce Lars Holmstrom, Equity Specialist, who is spearheading this initiative. Lars, would you share a few words with us?
Sure. Thanks so much, Dr. Hairston and Chief Adams. Dr. Hairston and Chief Adams described 4 key areas of this partnership agreement. The first, recruitment and development of staff with specific cultural competence regarding Virginia Indians. The second, accurate, respectful, and inclusive curriculum with the history and present realities of Virginia's Indigenous people in mind. Third, monitoring of success outcomes for Native Indian or Indigenous students. And lastly, student, family, and community partnerships with Native, Indian, and Indigenous individuals and organizations. Now, I'd like to report that I'm encouraged that we've begun efforts in each of these areas. We've developed and led professional development and community read sessions in partnership with VTech. And I'd like to give special thanks to our VTech educational liaison, Kara Canaday, for her partnership through making connections and so many other opportunities of late. Kara and the local Monacan Indian Nation have also partnered on our curriculum updates, including, but not limited to, elementary reframing the narrative work with social studies lead coach, Neely Reagan. We've developed equity tables that show the landscape of outcomes for students identifying racially as American Indian, with particular attention to career and technical education, an area of specific interest to the Virginia tribes. What I'm most hopeful about, though, are our emerging partnerships with VTech and our local Monacan Indian Nation. I'm sharing this brief summary of these startup efforts to point to the fact that our partnerships must be more than words on a page. We are temporary occupants of this land, which has been stewarded by the Indigenous people of Virginia for millennia. Moving forward, this partnership agreement represents our commitment to take continued steps to imagine and accomplish our public education and ACPS holding that knowledge in our minds and hearts and in communion with the Virginia tribes. Many thanks to Dr. Hairston, Dr. Haas, School Board Chair Graham Page, and the rest of the members, and of course, Chief Emeritus Adams and the VTech members for this important commitment. Thank you.
Many thanks, Lars and Ken, for your support. We are looking forward to building on this partnership to honor our division's mission statement. Dr. Haas or Mr. Page, what is your pleasure?
Dr. Haas?
Well, I did want to say I did have the opportunity to sign the agreement, and Dr. Harrison brought me a framed copy of it after we all signed it. And I want to thank Lars for your hard work to pull this together. And Chief Adams, it is an honor and a privilege to be able to sign next to you on that partnership agreement. It's a moment I won't forget, and I will honor it. And I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Chief Adams, that framed partnership agreement will be presented to you in person in the very near future.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Chief Adams, we really are pleased to have you with us tonight.
I'm so pleased to be here.
Are there any questions from any board members for Chief Adams or Dr. Harrison in regards to this project?
I don't have a question, but I'm just so excited about this. I'm really heartened by this work. So thank you very much for all who have done it.
Right. I echo your sentiments, Ms. Lee. And I do have one question, Ms. Chief Adams. You mentioned the Sharon School. Where is that located?
Sharon School is located in King William County. When I was a young man going to Sharon Indian School, there were two other schools close to us. One was a white school, which was just up the road, and one was an African-American school, which was just down the road. We had our own separate school system, and many of the Indian communities in Virginia had separate school systems, something that very few members of the public are aware of.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for being here with us, and we look forward to getting the signed, framed copy of the resolution to you. So
thank you so
for
much.
being here. Ms. Carlson has an announcement, and then she will also introduce our public comment segment.
Yeah, so I had a quick announcement. I had the privilege of doing a school tour this morning with Miss Acuff, and then I went at Meriwether Lewis, and then I followed that up with a tour at Burley. And I wanted to put it out there as a reminder to all the board members that we have the sign-up sheet for school tours and school visits that we're trying to get implemented with the hope that we can have it aligned with our evaluation metric, which was each school board member setting a goal of visiting at least 3 schools during the school year. I have a personal goal of doing 2. I learned a lot. It was really helpful to get back in schools. I'm just going to publicly admit it. I said it to the principal, so I owned it, but I had visited Burley before and I barely remembered it going up, even though that's where my own kids will be attending. So even if you visited a school in the last 4 years, it's helpful to go back and get to talk to people. And so I just wanted to put that plug out there and say that I think it's been going great. Kate's done visits. Graham, I think, spoke about having a great visit. John, they mentioned you're going to be there tomorrow. I was like, maybe I should have scheduled it on the same day he was coming, so you didn't have to do 2 visits back to back, but they're looking forward to having you. So that's all for my announcement. And then I will go ahead and we have 2 people signed up for public comment. So I will start by reading the public comment guidelines. Bear with me as I pull up my various documents. Okay, the school board invites and actively seeks the public's input in the matters relevant to school board governance and provides for time during its business meetings to hear from Albemarle County residents and community members. As authorized by ordinance of the County of Albemarle, the school board will hold its meetings electronically during the pandemic. The school board is nevertheless committed to encouraging public comments despite its need to meet on a virtual basis. For this reason, there will be 2 ways for the public to provide comment. First, as always, written comments can be submitted to the school board clerk prior to the start of the meeting and will be given to all school board members for review. You can also email directly to school board members individually or as a group. And then second, as long as the school board holds its meetings electronically, members of the public wishing to provide public comment during the meeting may sign up online by 2 p.m. the day of the meeting. I will go ahead and announce the two speakers. We only have two of them. When it's their turn, they will each have 3 minutes to speak. I will try to notify you when you reach the 2-minute mark. It's just me holding up a finger saying you have 1 minute left. So please be cognizant of your time. Speakers during the meeting or those submitting written comments should state their name and address or magisterial district. Further, speakers should limit comments to those matters that are relevant to school board governance or the operations of the school division. And lastly, although the school board will not respond to comments made during the public comment period, school board members may address comments at the end of the meeting agenda under other business. Those are the guidelines. The two speakers that we have are going to be Sarah Harris and Scott Guggenheimer. So Ms. Harris, I see you on.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Thank you, members of the school board. My name is Sarah Harris, and I'm a parent of 3 ACPS students in the Whitehall district. First, I would like to congratulate Dr. Acuff, Ms. Carlson, and Mr. Page on their recent re-elections. I appreciate your willingness to serve our community for another term, despite the amount of pressure that school board members are under, given the ongoing effects of the pandemic and the current social climate of our country. The results of the 2021 election are clear. Albemarle County voters support truth and equity in our schools. The majority of Albemarle County voters did not vote for Governor-elect Youngkin, who ran on a platform that goes against the anti-racism and inclusion work that students, teachers, community members, and division leadership within ACPS have worked diligently to promote and implement over the past few years. This county supports that work. We do not want a whitewashed version of American history, one that ignores the hard truths or minimizes the lived experiences of Black, Native, immigrant, and oppressed Americans taught to our kids. We do not want to see Toni Morrison's Beloved banned and burned. We do not want stories and lessons about LGBTQ civil rights pioneers questioned as to whether or not they are appropriate for children simply because they feature gay or transgender heroes. Thank you for your commitment to truth, equity, and inclusion of all in our schools. Thank you for continuing this critical work, despite a baffling ongoing national narrative that suggests that teaching our kids the truth about our country and including the voices and stories from marginalized communities will somehow harm our children. The opposite, of course, is true. When we know better, we can do better. And it's a good thing that our kids are learning more than we did. They will grow to be more empathetic, more compassionate, and more community focused. They will grow up to be better humans, and for that, I am grateful. Thank you very much for this work, and I appreciate you.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Harris. Our next and last speaker will be Scott Guggenheimer, who I also see on.
Hi, yeah, I'm Scott Guggenheimer. I am the parent of 2 students at Henley Middle School. I'm also a former English teacher, and in my day job, I work with public school systems all over the country who are trying to lead change and better serve their students. So it's with various lenses that I've seen anti-racist work, and I have some small sense of how hard it can be, whether it's at the individual level, interpersonal level, or institutional level. And although I maintain it's joyful work, I know it's not easy. So I'm just taking a moment to say thanks to Dr. Hairston for his leadership, Dr. Costa at Henley Middle School, Dr. Haas, the entire school board. I'm just so grateful to have 2 young people in a school system that has set as a goal to end the predictive value of race, class, gender, and special capacities on student success so that all of our students succeed. But I actually think when it's all said and done, our success will be beyond ending the predictive value of those factors on success, but rather that we have deeper relationships, that we have, a more connected community, more whole humans, cross-system partnerships like the exciting one we just heard about. And I know if that's going to happen, we all have a role to play. So in addition to saying thanks, I just want to say that I know others out there along with me are ready to roll up our sleeves, work alongside with you, in whatever way we're needed to be used. So thanks, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for those comments, Mr. Guggenheimer. That concludes public comment today. I hand the floor back to you, Chair Page.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carlson. Moving to our next item, agenda item, the COVID-19 update, Dr. McLaughlin.
Hello and good evening, board members. I'm Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning, And before I get started with the COVID update tonight, I would like to welcome in Stacy England, principal of Scottsville Elementary School, who joined us, but came in after Dr. Haas had greeted the other principals. So I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to Stacy and thanked her for being here tonight. So as I said, my name is Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning for the school division, and I'm here tonight to provide a COVID-19 status update. As you know, our updates align with the most recent guidance provided to us by the Virginia Department of Health, who gives us a 5-step protocol to consider for operational decisions that we make during the 2021-2022 school year. And I'll take you through the key metrics that we monitor from this guidance tonight. Our first metric is the level of community transmission. And some positive notes here. If you recall, just a few weeks ago, when we looked at this map of Virginia, it was pretty much bright red everywhere you looked, with the highest levels of transmission across every county. We are starting to see those numbers come down with several counties, including Albemarle, moving into the orange level of substantial transmission. There's also some counties with moderate transmission and even a couple that have dropped down to the lowest level of transmission. Our total case rate, or our case rate average per 100,000 people is at 87.81. That was over 100 the last time we gave you an update back in October. And our positivity percentage is 4.06, down slightly from the last time we gave you that update. So we've got a low transmission level for our positivity. We've got a substantial transmission level for our case incidence rate. When those two disagree with each other, we go with the higher of the two. So we are at a substantial transmission rate, but down a bit since the last time we spoke to you. Also good news is a look at our vaccination stats. Our 12 to 15-year-olds and our 16 to 17-year-olds have each hit about 90% of one dose of vaccination and are both sitting at around 83% for fully vaccinated. One thing that popped on to the site, just a little too late for me to get it on here, is the VDH has started to report percentages of 5 to 11-year-olds who are getting the vaccine. I believe vaccinations started last Thursday or Friday for those children, and our number was up just over 5% in the county in just a couple of days. So we're hopeful that we can start to see those numbers increase as well. The final metric that we take a look at is our transmission level within our schools. We continue to see sporadic cases. Last week, we had 15 student cases and 4 staff cases within our schools, but limited amounts of transmission taking place for that within the schools. Our attendance rate and student absenteeism on Tuesday, we were right at our baseline of 95% attendance rate. And we had 1% of our students, about 150 students, who were out on at home for quarantine purposes. So again, that 150 puts us just slightly above our baseline. In our staff capacity, while our absentee rate continues to be similar to what it's been in previous years, as we've told the board before, there's a significant challenge this year in finding substitute teachers to cover those absences. So I want to thank the board for the approval they gave just recently to the modified calendar for the remainder of this school year. I think those additional time for teachers to do their work within our schools will be greatly appreciated. As a reminder, we've got several key mitigation strategies that we feel are working very well in our school, including promoting vaccination, consistent and correct use of masks, physical distancing, improved ventilation, strong hand washing and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining healthy facilities, staying home when sick, and doing contact tracing when we do have a case at school. And before we close tonight, I would like to introduce Kevin Kirst, who is here to give you a brief update on students with disabilities and mask wearing. I'll turn things over to Kevin.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, just wanted to give an update to an issue that has come before the board, and that was with regard to my procedural implementation of some really tight enforcement as the school started of mask wearing, which included kids with disabilities. And where the issue came up was there were students with disabilities, significantly so, that in spite of, and that's really important to clarify here, in spite of intensive and sustained interventions and evidence-based practices, still we're finding it very difficult to wear a mask. Since that time, since I want to say late September, early October, I reviewed practices with our school board attorney, superintendent's cabinet, the school health advisory board, and honestly, importantly so, parents as well, and reviewed those procedures in the context of CDC guidelines, the additional mitigation strategies that we're using, Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Ed, and really looked to adopt other procedural mitigation strategies in order to bring students with significant disabilities and challenges wearing masks into school for their in-person instruction. And we have been successful in doing that. There were about 40 cases of students that had some issue with mask wearing and attending in-person instruction. About 25 of those were more significant. 15, there were just issues, but the kids were attending school. But I wanted to report tonight to you that all of those issues are resolved, meaning all students with disabilities that previously we had concerns with have been offered and are attending school. There are some whose parents opted not to come back, but we have offered, made clear the path, and have revised our process, mitigation strategies in order to introduce them back into our setting, our school settings, with additional mitigation strategies. So that is my thumbnail update. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the board for either Mr. Kurtz or Dr. McLaughlin?
I have a question for Dr. McLaughlin. I hear that some cabinet members are taking turns being substitutes since we're very short. Any word on how that's going? Are you guys enjoying being back in the classroom?
Correct. Dr. Haas has challenged us all to get out at least once a month to our schools. In fact, we were just meeting with a few principals this afternoon and offered up our services to them so that they could get out into their PLC meetings. So we always welcome the opportunities to get back out into our schools.
Mr. Bonham has me coming out to substitute next Friday if you would like to join one of my classes, Ms. Osborne.
Sounds good.
I think you'll be a great student.
Mr. Kirst,
What about me, Matt?
No comment.
Mr. Kirst, one of the questions that the parents who did come to public comment raised was, learning losses. I guess they're all back in the classroom as of last month, and what have you done to sort of make sure that they can catch up?
So really, honestly, in the short term, we've doubled down on the efforts. It's been every day since the beginning of the school year dealing with this issue that I will be honest, we haven't even got ahead of things enough to say, all right, now that everyone's back in school, what are the next steps? So our team is expecting to plan along with the Department of Instruction. What is the summer going to look like? What are breaks going to look like? What are our days going to look like in order to address that issue? But right now it was a matter of getting kids back, some of which that hadn't been back in schools, since March of 20, and settled in. So that, Dr. Acuff, that's kind of where I'm at. Haven't gotten there yet.
Well, you've made an important step forward in this. The other issue that I've noticed is that among the positions that that we're having trouble filling are for special ed assistants. How is that impacting the work that you're doing?
Well, it's everyone is stretched thin.
Right.
There's a parallel with all staff from bottom to top. So
right.
but we're
No.
able to do the work. I don't want to give the impression that, you know, we're unable to provide appropriate education. It's more of the stress level on staff.
So I guess the message should be, if anybody has a resume they want to dust off and apply, that we have positions open.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for either Dr. McLaughlin or Mr. Kurtz? Okay, if not, thank you, Mr. Kurtz, for bringing us that very uplifting update. And Dr. McLaughlin, are you going to be bringing us COVID updates in a changed format after tonight's meeting?
Well, yes, I am. Have a very important announcement about the COVID update. It is moving to the consent agenda. So all the information will still be there in every board packet for you. And it'll be moving to the consent agenda instead of being a standalone item. But as always, as you look through that, if you see anything that brings up questions or concerns or anything that you want us to report on, let me know, and we can bring that information to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would also like to echo what Dr. McLaughlin said about welcoming Ms. Stacy England, principal at Scottsville Elementary, to our meeting. So Ms. England, glad to have you with us. Our next item on the agenda is foundation update from Ms. Dunn and also Ms. Cromwell, who will be presenting information about the ACPS Foundation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board and cabinet. I'm really excited to introduce Ms. Laurie Cromwell, who's the founder and president of Foundation Innovation, the foundation consultant we'll be partnering with in the upcoming months as we start our own foundation for ACPS. Mrs. Cromwell was the first woman elected to an at-large position on our local school board, as well as the first woman to be elected as its president. She was also president of the Local Economic Development Commission and a founding board member of the local Chamber of Commerce. She won Chamber Citizen of the Year and the Outstanding Service Award by the Texas Pioneer Foundation, and she founded Foundation Innovation in 2003. So Ms. Cromwell obviously has a great deal of expertise when it comes to not just schools, but also economics and everything that kind of goes on in a community around schools. And Foundation Innovation is a consulting firm that has guided hundreds of school divisions in administration, development, marketing, and training as they relate to public education foundations. And they were chosen from among several consultants who responded to an RFQ that the division put out this past April. And that RFQ steering committee that chose Foundation Innovation included Kate Acuff, Graham Page, Ross Holden, Phil Jeremita, and me. And Foundation Innovation and Mrs. Cromwell have guided such divisions as Dallas, Texas, and Williamsburg, James City, Virginia, in their foundation development processes. So ACPS's main objective for starting this foundation includes increasing equity and ensuring equal opportunity across the school division. Of course, that aligns with everything that we're doing in the school division within the new strategic plan and even before that. So this foundation would act in collaboration with the current Charlottesville-Albemarle Public Education Foundation, as well as with our school division's PTOs and booster clubs, and will not be meant to replace them or to compete with them, but rather just to serve as an added resource in this school division on a division-wide level, as opposed to more locally. So there were $200,000 put aside to fund this foundation development. That was part of the school board reserve for the current fiscal year only. That money is located as part of the Executive Services Department budget. And part of the work that we'll do with Foundation Innovation in the upcoming months will be to do studies that will help us determine next steps surrounding the 2022-23 budget and how we'll most effectively fund the foundation moving forward. And so I'm going to turn it over at that to Ms. Cromwell so that she can tell you all these amazing things that she knows and talk to you a little bit more about the process through Foundation Innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and good evening, school board members. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this evening because we're about to launch something really exciting. We are about to launch establishing the Education Foundation, and I wanted to just talk with you briefly this evening because I know you have a packed agenda, but I wanted to just talk to you briefly about what that process might look like and how you might continue to be involved and updated as we move forward with this opportunity. The Education Foundation will be a 501c3 organization, which is just typically what we refer to for charities because they are governed by the IRS code 501c3. We will be working through a small steering committee that would consist of a few of the people that were on the search committee, some community members, the superintendent, to try and work through some of the infrastructure and corporate documents initially, which is not the funnest part, but it is an extremely important part. So we'll be submitting applications to the state, we'll be submitting applications to the IRS, and we'll be working on some policies and some organizational and structural opportunities for us to develop this corporation. We do want to make sure that in this infrastructure mode that we realize that this is a business, even though it is a charitable organization. We want to set this up to be sustainable. We want it to be transparent. We want it to be credible in the community. So that is a really important step initially. Then we will be talking about who else we want to serve on this Education Foundation board. And that's where we would really like your input. We would really like for you guys to think about who might be a good fit and submit those names perhaps to Helen or to another administrator to get to the steering committee so that we can develop our team. We want to develop a very robust and a very diverse team that reflects the diversities in your own community and your student population. So it's important for us to really think about every single individual and what they bring to the table and how they can build capacity for this organization. So we'll be working on that board development piece as a steering committee, and then we will invite all of the members of the community that we have identified that we would like to serve on the Education Foundation board. Then we will be looking at how do we look to people internally, externally, how do we create an image for the foundation so that we can become perhaps a charity of choice for some that want to support the school system. Then we will talk about programs, and this is very important, and we had an opportunity to discuss, I talked with the administrators the other day about making sure that we align our programs with the school system. We want to make sure that what are the needs that are most pressing with the school district are the needs that are most pressing that can be identified by the foundation to help support. So we'll be identifying funding priorities and the programs that we want to support. And that is really unlimited. The foundation can support anything, honestly, that we deem as a foundation board appropriate. So we will want to craft that to make sure that people know when they give money to the foundation, what it actually will be spent on. And then the final component is actually fundraising. So I will be teaching the foundation board how to ask people for money. We will try and make sure that everybody that's on the foundation board feels comfortable in that arena, because actually investing in the foundation is investing in your own community. It's investing in, like Helen said earlier, it can help economic development, it can help motivation. There are a lot of things internally and externally that may not even be directly from resources. It can be indirect benefits as well. So it's really exciting because I can't tell you right now everything that's going to happen, but I can tell you it's a win-win, that it is an awesome opportunity for us to be able to allow philanthropists, private foundations, alumni, anybody that supports the school system to be involved in making sure that our students and educators have all the tools that they need above and beyond what tax dollars are allocated for. So I know that we have a few minutes left, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for being with us, Ms. Cromwell.
It's my pleasure.
Do any board members have any questions for Ms. Cromwell?
I don't have a question right now, but I do have a point of clarification that I think it's maybe worthwhile to say in public, because we did get some feedback from community members with them asking about or believing for whatever reason that the foundation was going to take money from PTOs. I think we can probably clear that up pretty easily.
You know, and I think that's a very common, especially it's like seeing the invisible right now. We don't have anything to explain or to show them. So we have talked about this a great deal, Helen and I, and we feel like it's very important for us to sit down with some of those booster clubs and PTAs to make sure that they understand that we are not taking away revenue. I mean, we've been doing this since 2003. There are many PTAs and booster clubs that actually financially support education foundations because there are many school campuses that have more capacity from their parents or others than other campuses. And so an education foundation can balance that out, like the equity that Helen mentioned. It's every campus, every student. So there are many opportunities for us to reassure not only other charities in the community, but our booster clubs. Anybody that may feel threatened by creating another charity, we want to have a conversation with them so that they understand that our fundraising is going to be more like higher education, where we're actually developing relationships with people that see our mission and see the return on the investment of any kind of money that they were to trust the foundation with. So it typically, I've never seen it impact negatively booster clubs ever since 2003, but the most important piece of that is that there has to be communication so that they feel comfortable in this realm.
And that's a great answer. And I would even go one further, because I think what was maybe going around was that there was going to be like a dues, like we were literally going to go into the budget of PTOs and take some of their funding in order to fund that. And that is just not going to happen.
That's not accurate at all. That's not accurate.
We got a few emails about that. So I just wanted to say it out loud that that's not.
Thank you for bringing that up. And in fact, one thing that I really want to emphasize, not only to the administration that I did the other day, but to you as school board members, if you hear anything good or bad, please funnel that to Helen, because I can sometimes say that's an indicator that we have to address right now. We've been doing this long enough that something that may feel insignificant to you that you've heard from a community member or parent may be really something that we need to address. So please make this as much an open communication as possible so that we can make this the most successful organization that we possibly can.
And I just wanted to add, since you're talking a bit about budget briefly, that I mentioned the budget that we have in the executive services that we've set aside for this development, but I just want to make sure it's clear that Foundation Innovation is costing us only $15,000, so not that entire chunk of money. I just want to make sure that was clear to the public watching right now.
I just wanted to add, hi Lori. I just wanted to add that I was part of the selection committee and we reviewed several applications, and Foundation Innovation was, I think, by far the most experienced, has a very large portfolio of setting up such foundations with public school divisions. And also Lori has a long track record of engaging the business community to help be a part of that foundation building. And she brings both the economic development and the real knowledge of public education to bear. And I look forward to working with her.
Same. And, you know, I mean, I say it every day that I love public education, just like all of you on this call. And we need to do everything we possibly can to engage and support. And a foundation can be that bridge between the community and the school division like you've never seen before. So great things are ahead, I have no doubt.
I know I already spoke, but I'm super excited. That's a great presentation. I'm really looking forward to having a foundation and tapping into the altruistic nature of our community. I know that private schools do a really good job of it's acceptable in a private school to donate to a school, whereas public schools, we don't always foster the mentality that, you know, it's great to give back to your community and your students. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what can come of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm available anytime you have questions. Feel free to reach out to me because I want to make sure that you guys stay informed about what we're doing and how this is developing as we go along.
I wonder, Helen, whether some of the other members of the school board might like to look at the Innovation Foundation's website. That might be a useful link.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to send that around in any further information. I would just like to echo what Dr. Kadekoff mentioned a minute ago, which is that Ms. Cromwell knows just an unbelievable amount and so much about this. She's truly an expert. And so I would love to showcase that by sending around a little bit more information. So I will do that tomorrow. Thank you, Kate. And thank you so much, Lori, for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you again, Ms. Cromwell. And Ms. Dunn, thank you also for the presentation tonight, the update. We will now have a report from our anti-racism policy, Dr. Harrison and Ms. Jasmine Fernandez.
Good evening, everyone. I have this sticky key. Sometimes it will let me in and sometimes it will not. But once again, good evening to everyone. I'm Bernard Hairston, your Assistant Superintendent for School and Community Empowerment. Joining me for this presentation this evening will be Jasmine Fernandez, our project manager, and Jamie Gilner, the chair of the Policy Enforcement Subcommittee. We would like for you to know that this report represents our progressive steps towards striving to become an anti-racist school division as per your directive. Next slide, please. This report also represents the second annual update of the anti-racism policy, as you well know, adopted in 2019. We honor the wisdom of the student-led policy writing team, which required staff to collect, to review, and to provide an annual report to this board. They strategically organized the policy and regulations for easy implementation and accountability under these 5 major categories. First, the Policy Communication Subcommittee shared examples of the twofold mission of engaging and informing the Albemarle County Public Schools community about the policy and how our students are being engaged. Second, the Leadership and Administration Subcommittee focused on piloting a departmental equity needs assessment, identifying disparities in course participation, and reviewed alternatives for improving the tracking of suspensions. Third, the Curriculum and Instruction Subcommittee explored cultural and racial diversity updates in curriculum and instructional materials. Fourth, the Professional Learning / Training Subcommittee documented staff participation in required cultural awareness, culture-responsive teaching, and anti-racism professional development opportunities. In addition to how our major frameworks, such as the professional learning communities and the teacher performance appraisal practices, have been reviewed to consider an anti-racist perspective. And fifth, the Policy Enforcement Subcommittee provided an overall evaluative review of the policy and regulations to include lessons learned and next steps. Next slide, please. Thank you. This report also represents our efforts of aligning the division's anti-racism statement that we reject all forms of racism as destructive to the division's mission, vision, values, and goals, to our mission statement, which states, working together as a team, we will end the predictive value of race, class, gender, and special capacities for our children's success through high quality teaching and learning for all. We seek to build relationships with families and communities to ensure that every student succeeds. We will know every student. A powerful statement. Next slide, please. An anti-racism steering committee was established to implement the policy. It is composed of staff from various schools, departments, and division leadership. It has grown from an initial 12 members to as many as 35 contributing members. The steering committee meets monthly, and the subcommittees meet in between the committee meetings. The committee spends quality time focusing on what it means to be anti-racist leaders. In addition, our meetings focus on understanding and applying the policy definition of anti-racism as the practice of first identifying, then challenging in order to change the value structures and behaviors that perpetuate systemic racism. As a committee, we practice for self-growth. Next slide, please. We are learning and confirming that the anti-racism policy is playing a significant role in institutionalizing division priorities as per our newly adopted Learning for All strategic plan through the 3 goals. For example, the Thriving Students goal is being addressed by focusing on eliminating opportunity, access, and achievement gaps through the policy regulations that all teachers and students shall be trained in culturally responsive teaching practices. This information can be found on page 28 of the report. Over 370 staff members are currently receiving training to complete their credentialing in culturally responsive teaching. Also, may I add, the board recently received an excellent report from Mr. Mike Craddock, the director of Center One. He outlined their efforts to recruit minority and other untapped student groups. These efforts were influenced by the policy regulation of addressing course enrollment disparities. The second goal of affirming and empowering communities was highlighted in the partnership agreement with the Virginia Education Tribal Consortium presentation that you heard in an earlier agenda. This initiative aligns with the regulation that curriculum and instructional materials shall reflect cultural and racial diversity and include a range of perspectives and experiences. Now, the third strategic goal of addressing equitable and transformative resources was captured in the October 14th impressive hiring update presented by Dr. Daphne Kaiser and the HR team. Their work was influenced by the policy regulation to develop and conduct a systemic needs assessment for the division to identify processes and practices that cause or contribute to inequitable outcomes. And that's on page 12 of the report under leadership and administration. I want to acknowledge the board's foresight and leadership of modeling the value of excellence by honoring high expectations of accountability to adopt this policy and to hold us accountable for mitigating barriers to student success. I'd like to turn this over to Jasmine Fernandez to carry us through some of the next slides.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harrison. As mentioned, my name is Jasmine Fernandez. I serve as a project advisor and the anti-racism program manager for the Anti-Racism Policy Steering Committee. As Dr. Harrison mentioned earlier, ultimately we aim to address policies and practices that perpetuate racism and hinder our ability to advance our mission. I would be remiss if I also didn't acknowledge that while we have taken some steps in the right direction, we have a lot more work to do, and we recognize that there is still much more that we can also do as facilitators and leaders of this work. With that, I trust that you all read our report, which includes comprehensive status updates for all of the key projects. The report captures work implemented from last November to present day. For this evening, to honor the time allotted to us, I will focus this presentation on a few particular projects. Next slide. As it pertains to the Policy Communications Subcommittee, the Student Equity Advisory Team, SEAT, hosted a second student town hall. SEAT partnered with 2 student-led organizations, the Young Asian American and Pacific Islanders of Charlottesville and Albemarle High School's Black Student Union. Together, the students shared their experiences with combating hypervisibility, the heightened scrutiny associated with their race. They also discussed their experiences combating the pressures associated with being perceived as the model minority. which is rooted in stereotypes and dismisses the individual differences and talents of members of the Asian community. Recently, the Policy Communications Subcommittee partnered with our Anti-Racism Training Subcommittee and ACPS Community Education Open Doors program, which you'll see on the next slide. We facilitated a modified version of the anti-racism orientation. Next slide, please. We facilitated a modified version of the anti-racism orientation. The community session included an overview of related definitions, videos, and small group discussions. Here is some of the feedback about the session. I will give you a few seconds to read through the comments. As outlined in the report on pages 10 to 20, the Leadership and Administration Subcommittee has been working on a number of projects. This evening, I would like to bring to your attention a new project. While not a specific deliverable in the regulation, we have created an anti-racism equity decision-making tool. The tool aims to guide administrators and departmental directors on addressing a related issue. The tool originated after a series of equity issues occurring in schools and as a response to a grant with the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation. The tool includes reflection questions alongside 6 key areas of focus. We have already started to pilot the tool alongside a few schools and departments. The plan is to archive and workshop the case studies at our division level leadership team meetings in hope of exchanging best practices and building our proficiency to address equity issues in a manner that will reduce harm. Before adopted for system-wide implementation, we'll evaluate the tool's effectiveness. Similar to the Leadership and Administration Subcommittee, the Curriculum Instruction Team has a number of projects under their purview. You can learn more about the various projects on pages 21 to 25. As it relates to the deliverable Developing Anti-Racism Curriculum, tonight I would like to bring to your attention our middle school advisory framework. The rollout of Henley's anti-racism advisory lessons was a learning experience for us all. To allow for a further review of age-appropriate content, a group of ACPS educators, including diversity resource teachers and educators trained in culturally responsive teaching, convened this summer. They created a sample framework for a middle school advisory experience. As you can see in the image to the left, the team recommended 4 domains: affiliation, identity, mindset, and success. One of the concepts to be explored within this framework is anti-racism. The Department of Instruction consulted a researcher trained in anti-racism and developmental psychology to advise on the preliminary framework and offer feedback on the design process. I want to emphasize that the advisory curriculum, as such, this framework has yet to come to you for approval as it is still under development. But we are looking forward to making progress this year and designing lessons that are relevant and aligned to anti-racism pedagogy. The next 2 slides are about projects within the Training Subcommittee. As you are aware, last year when we presented, we were in the process of finalizing the content of the orientation. I'm happy to report that today, 89% of the division has completed the orientation. And while some schools and departments completed the training together, each staff member, so that's approximately 2,600 employees out of 2,900 staff, completed an exit form. The feedback received gave us valuable insight into future training topics and ideas for how we can ensure that the content is accessible to non-instructional staff. In addition to the orientation as a means to build the racial consciousness of the division, as you are aware, we implemented a division-wide book study and trained the trainer model based on Glenn Singleton's book, Courageous Conversations About Race. Next slide, please. At each level, the school board to the cabinet and division level leadership team, everyone participated in a number of training sessions. Additionally, we hosted a monthly optional session after school, the Courageous Conversations About Race Forum. We met as a large group and then broke out by feeder pattern. On average, 50 to 60 people attended the forums. The forums allowed for another opportunity to engage in deeper conversations about people's experiences with race and racism. I would like to thank our anti-racism professional development implementation team, a team within the training subcommittee that included instructional staff, school administrators, departmental directors, and central leaders. They played a valuable role in developing the content and facilitating the sessions. This said, we recognize the importance of addressing acts of bias and racism in and outside of the classroom. On page 34 in the report, we discussed a training we hosted over the summer in collaboration with the Department of Instruction. Together, we facilitated a training aimed at all athletic directors and sports coaches. This is an area of continued growth for us, developing more tailored trainings for non-instructional staff and the broader community. Next slide. One of policies enforcement's deliverables included producing this report. I would like to give a special shout out to Sarah Doonesbury and Jamie Gelner, who were instrumental in compiling the data. This summer, we also worked on rebooting the anonymous app alert. We retrained administrators on how to manage the app. We recently circulated new posters across all schools, and we also updated a few policies, including policy GB, Equal Employment Opportunity, and the student version, JB, Equal Education Opportunity. Both policies outline clear procedures for reporting and monitoring acts of racism. In the spirit of transparency, we thought it was important to share some of our lessons learned from this past year. The first lesson, school board members, I have to tell you, the comprehensive nature of implementing this policy requires extended time for staff. There were plenty of times that the anti-racism professional development implementation team and our steering committee had to meet before and after school hours to develop the content and facilitate programs. To avoid staff burnout, a lesson learned is that we need to continue to explore ways that recognizes the efforts of our staff, but also provide further opportunities for access to professional learning around race and anti-racism during the school day. Oversight of the anti-racism orientation, there were quite some operational challenges, specifically around cleaning the data. In the future, it might be more seamless if all new employees complete the orientation during their onboarding. Another important lesson is creating space for constructive feedback. As mentioned in the report, we recognize that we too have room to grow as facilitators and leaders of this work. We also recognize that everyone has different beliefs and that everyone is at different points in their journey. And so we acknowledge the need to have more spaces for people, including our staff and community members, to offer constructive feedback, whether that be via surveys or through small group discussions. This said, the greatest lesson and perhaps a validation of our work is that when we institutionalize our priorities, we can make progress. This year in particular, we institutionalized anti-racism into our strategic plan, the school improvement plans, and our professional learning communities. However, again, we acknowledge that we have a long way to go. There is no doubt about that. We must persist. We must continue to remain committed to this work of addressing racism in our division and ensuring that all students have the opportunity to reach their full potential. For the sake of time, next slide, please. Here are some of our future priorities for this upcoming year. In particular, I would like to bring your attention to leadership and administration. In alignment with the policy, the Department of Human Resources will circulate a division-wide needs assessment, which will examine trends related to employment engagement and organizational culture. The department will also facilitate targeted focus groups to further learn about people's experiences working at ACPS, and that includes their interactions with race and desired supports to help inform their experience. And then policy enforcement, I would just like to presence that this is our second year, but this upcoming February will mark 3 years since the policy was adopted. And we would like to explore the opportunity of having an outside evaluator assess our strengths and areas of growth. I realize that this was indeed a lengthy update, but before we open it up for questions, I would just like to publicly thank our Anti-Racism Steering Committee which includes our Student Equity Advisory Team for their leadership, for their passion, for their persistence around this work. I know that Dr. Hairston and Dr. Haas also share the sentiment that we are looking forward to continuing to work alongside them, alongside you, the board, and our community to one day become an anti-racist school district. Thank you.
Jamie, are you there?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Hairston. Thank you, Jasmine, for presenting on behalf of our team. And at this time, we would like to take any questions from the board.
Questions or comments? This is a growth model, so we really would appreciate your suggestions in terms of your observations after reading the report.
I thought it was an impressive report. What is the level of student interest in being on the SEA, the Student Advisory Committee?
I would say that there's a growing interest in student participation in that group. We have begun to establish relationships with multiple student organizations, and we are seeing students who are surfacing and want to be a part of that process. Karen Waters-Wicks is leading that work. She has an excellent relationship with students in multiple schools, and we see that as an area where we're going to have a lot of impact in the future.
Dr. Harrison, if I would just add, one of their goals is to ensure that they have representation from all of the middle and high schools. And as a starting place, one of the priorities for this year is to actually create a directory of all of these student groups so that they have an opportunity to do more recruitment throughout different schools.
I guess I would also like to ask our student representative, Antrobius, about the level of awareness of students about this work.
Sure. To be honest with you, I haven't heard much of this. I have heard of some of the student groups you mentioned, namely that Asian and Pacific Islander group. I see posters for that all over Monticello, and I think it's got a pretty big presence in the community. So honestly, I think just promoting it among the students directly. The posters are definitely one helpful way, but honestly, I wasn't aware of it. But it's definitely something I'm interested in.
You know, a comment and then a question is that for the five of us on the board who were around when the anti-racism policy was passed, we talked at the time that this did have a long way to go, that this could be a generational progression. This could be the school cycles. You know, to get to the point where enough students have gone through it from, you know, kindergarten to 12, to have this just be a concept that is inculcated into the culture, and it becomes a routine and part of how these students see the world, see each other. And I'm intrigued, Ms. Fernandez, about your comment about having an assessment done of the program, you know, in the maybe at the 3rd year anniversary or at some point during the year. Could you expand on that a little bit, please?
Sure, I'm happy to. I also would like to welcome our policy enforcement chair to weigh in. I'm happy to kick it off. We recognize that we are very attached to this work. And so just to allow for a broader perspective, right? Sometimes when you're doing the work, there is such thing as confirmation bias. And for us, as Dr. Harrison mentioned, we do believe in a growth model. We recognize that we have areas for improvement. And so we believe that having an outside evaluator come in will just allow us to have a different perspective, and we can use that information to deepen our areas of growth. Jamie, would you like to add to that?
I think that pretty much hits the nail on the head. I mean, we do internal evaluations. I am a program evaluator for the division, but I think somewhere from 3 to 5 years out, as Jasmine said, we adopted the policy in 2018. 2019. So we're coming up to 3 years, but somewhere between that 3 to 5 year mark, it may be good to get an outside perspective to come in and validate some of the work that we're doing.
Are there groups who do that for this type of a program, or is this a new enough concept that there aren't groups per se that are focused on anti-racism policy implementation?
I think that's something that we'd have to explore and put out an RFQ for. But yes, I do think there are groups emerging to do this work.
Thank you.
I found the report really compelling as well, and it had a lot of interesting data presented in it. One thing that I just found curious was the orientation completion rates at various, it seemed not as disparate with groups and departments, but it did seem a little bit all over the board at school locations. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about that, or if you had any sort of lessons learned about that.
Well, let me just share with you what our plans are moving forward to get as close to that 100% as possible, because it states in the policy that we expect all of our staff to participate in this initiative. For the 300 or so staff members who have not completed it thus far, they will continue to receive communications that it is an expectation. There will be timelines established by which it must be done. And if it's not done by those timelines, then there will be some expectations or reprimands for not adhering to our expectations. So that is the plan. We're going to continue to work with staff because we want them to be committed to the work, but we do have expectations for everyone to participate in it because it is policy.
In the report, I saw that the app had been updated. So how much has it been used, and what type of information has it been able to give to the team?
Jasmine, can you respond to that? I don't know if we can respond to that today, Mr. Page. What we know is that we're tracking the reports that are coming in. Dr. Jesse Turner has oversight of that. He's been working with Karen Waters-Wicks as part of our communications committee. And quite frankly, I have not checked those data recently.
What I can say though is we, in touching base with Dr. Turner most recently, there have not been a lot of reports. I believe might have only as of to date, 9 specifically related to some sort of use of racial discrimination or language. But I do want to just reiterate, we just rebooted the app. And also this is part of the work, right? Going back to what our student representative just mentioned on this call, how do we continue to educate our students on the use of this app? And also, are there other ways that students can report acts of racism? So this is an area of growth for us. In our next report, we will certainly make sure that we have data, but I just want to emphasize that for us, it's also about continuing to do the work. Hopefully one day we don't have to use this app, but at this time, I just want to preference that this is still in the early stages of being rebooted.
Okay.
Mr. Page, as a lesson learned,
to advertise that the app is available, how will you let students know that that's there and that it's for their use?
Yeah, so we've circulated posters. I think we might have had a picture in the report. Those posters have been recently circulated. They're all throughout all of our buildings in the past couple of weeks. We also are going to continue to work with the Student Equity Advisory Team. They created a promo video that we want to circulate, but we also recognize that we have to be more thoughtful about how we leverage social media and leveraging our Student Advisory Team to get the word out about how to report. Sorry, Dr. Harrison, did I cut you off? Were you trying to say something?
No, I was just going to share with Mr. Page as a lesson learned, and as a part of our rebooting the app, we realized in the first year of using the app that the language was such that when students reported, it was so vague that they did not present enough information that would warrant an investigation from the school administration. So we were able to rewrite some of the language, such as give us some specific times. You can give us names. You don't have to give your name because you are anonymous, but we need names of individuals who are being victimized, times, days, etc., that would allow administrators to have more concrete information. So we're hoping that that will make a big difference.
Are there other questions from other board members on our anti-racism update?
Yep. One, thank you guys for preparing this. It's wonderful. So my question would be for the general public, because there's a lot of information in there. How could they, what's an easy way for them to access this report beyond pulling up the school board thing, going into the date and pulling up the agenda item?
It is being posted on the division website.
Okay.
Is that good? Is that good enough? Would you like something else?
I think the division website is good as long as it's not really easy to find is what I'd say. Sometimes these things get buried. It's hard even for me to sometimes navigate through and figure out where things are because there's a lot of information. And so my second thing, which would just be thank you, is I really appreciated the way that you represented some of the data, and it gives us, I think, a lot to think about because it isn't all roses, I guess to say, but I think y'all did a good job putting that out there and letting us see it and see where we are. For example, the CRT credentialing and kind of the trajectory we'd need versus where we are and understanding that. I think that's stood out to me. And I really, something we've talked about in the past, but I appreciate it, is putting the individual schools and how they're performing on some of these metrics, like the orientation that Judy mentioned. I mean, some schools got 100%. Those schools should be commended. That takes effort and I appreciate it. So those schools, I don't know where we really stand on like giving them credit, because I don't want to like put down these schools that didn't do, but I mean, we have administrators that are rocking out on all this. So thank you to those who are, and it's in the report. That's all.
I want to just kind of follow up. I think that's an outstanding idea. One of you mentioned, I think Jasmine mentioned earlier, how hard everyone that is working on this is working. And I think we do need to do more to recognize the schools that achieve a level of buy-in and really getting it at the ground floor to do this work. So that's a takeaway for me. I don't think we really do enough to celebrate our schools for their successes under our own terms. We allow other outside organizations to rank us and tell us how we're doing. But this is a marquee, just cornerstone project for Albemarle County Schools, and we should do something to acknowledge those schools publicly that hit a home run, like getting 100%. The other thing I want to follow up on is that Dr. Harrison and I met earlier this week, and he came in and he felt confident enough at that point to let me know what the exact percentage of completers was for the orientation. They had used, I think, a Google form initially to try to track all this, so it had gotten somewhat hazy at some point. Our next step on that is going to be, I'm working on a letter that will go out individually to employees, a paper letter to let them know they had not completed the orientation, and then we would be following up with the standards of conduct guidelines around that. For years, we did something called an online annual training through our human resources department, and everybody got a follow-up, and we got to 100%. So we will be getting to 100% on the orientation. And then that way, as we hire new employees and we onboard them, then they'll have to go through that, which I make it sound like they'll have to go through it. It's a great orientation and you learn a lot to go through it, so that we should all want to do these experiences. So we will make sure it gets to 100%. But I really want to applaud the team that worked on this. The big takeaway I had right away when I read the report was the amount of integration and boundary spanning that has gone on among the departments around this work. There were, in the past, you have groups that might go after this important initiative, but not have other teams, other departments, other leaders, other people get involved to the extent that we have now. So it's really been amazing boundary scanning that this committee has done to bring everybody together on the same page. The last thing I'll say is we way underutilize student email. There's no reason why David should not get an email that says, here's the anonymous app link, here's how it works. I don't know why we can't break that paradigm of we email everybody else everything, but we don't email our own students. So I want to give a public shout out. We have got to use student email. We should not send out any communication to families without sending it to students as it's age appropriate. I have students tell me that. They've said, Dr. Hawes, why would you send an email to my parents about me, about something going on at Albemarle High School and not send it to me? So we have got to get on board and employ our students in this work. They are unemployed in this work. We need to employ them. And I'll leave it at that, but very proud of the work. Let's keep moving. Let's get those 13,000 plus students on board with us.
Dr. Haas, that would be a task that we will share with our seat team advisor ASAP. Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I'm sorry to go twice, people. I know it's a long night, but I just want to say, I noticed that the end, you mentioned that one of the things in the fall evaluation is looking at the outcomes. So I just want to tie it, because I know we're doing a lot of things here and I know you guys are aware of it, but the outcome that we want is higher student achievement for all of our students. And I love seeing the progress. It's small, but the hope is if we can get that small amount of progress year over year, then we'll right some of these wrongs. And so I'm really looking forward to that update, and I hope we keep that component as part of it, because there's a lot of I know there's a lot of moving things going on, and that's the end goal. That's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you, Dr. Harrison, Ms. Fernandez, and Ms. Gelner for that excellent report. Keep up the great work, because like we heard in the public comments, our anti-racism work here in Albemarle County is really important. So make sure that we continue on this path. So thank you so much, all three of you, for the report.
Thank you.
We will now take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 8:21 p.m. 8:21. Thank you. It is now 8:21 and we are ready to proceed with our agenda. Dr. McLaughlin is coming to us with a State of the Division report. Dr. McLaughlin.
Good evening again, board members. My name is Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning for the School Division, and I'm here tonight to present our annual State of the Division report, which we have entitled Looking Forward, Turning Newly Developed Capabilities into Higher Levels of Student Engagement and Learning. Before we get started, I want to let the board know that the process of creating the State of the Division report began a long time ago, back in August when we started to get our SOL results in last year. And I really want to give a huge thank you to the team that worked on this, including Chris Gilman, Jamie Gellner, India Hahn, Lauren Hunt, Helen Dunn, Jennifer Butler, and Phil Giaramita, among countless others. So the State of the Division report provides a look back at our most recent school year, allowing us to celebrate our accomplishments and set targets for continued improvement. A link to the full State of the Division report has been provided in electronic school board for all board members and is posted on our division website. And similar to our previous presentation on the anti-racism policy, tonight's presentation will deliver highlights from the report including our new online format for the report, a review of several bright spots from last year, areas that we've identified for continued focus, and our transition from a report based on our now retired strategic plan, Horizon 2020, to one framed by our new strategic plan, Learning for All. So as you may recall, in previous years, our State of the Division report was a static PDF document. With the implementation of our new web platform this year, we've been able to transition the report to a more user-friendly online and interactive website that allows users to more easily navigate to the information they seek about our school division. Hosting our report in this way allows a wider audience to access our report, and the tab design makes it much simpler for stakeholders to find the specific information for which they are looking. Our online platform also allows us to embed graphics that can be updated in real time on our website as things change. And one quick note about the new site, in case you're going there, we're currently experiencing a bit of a compatibility with the Firefox browser. So if you are checking out the report online, it's best to use Chrome, Edge, Opera, or Safari. So before we get to the heart of the report, I think it's important to remind ourselves what our school experience looked like as we navigated the pandemic last year. As you recall, we opened our school year in stage 2 of our return to school plan, during which time nearly all of our students were learning virtually. We moved to stage 3 on November 9th and welcomed back many of our students in grades pre-K through 3 for 2 days a week of in-person instruction. And then from December through February, we went back and forth between stages 1 and 3 as the conditions changed in our area, but we were able to fully return to stage 3 on the first day of February. The final stage we entered was stage 4 on March 15th, which allowed our pre-K through 3 students to attend school for 4 days a week, and our students in grades 4 to 12 to attend school 2 days per week in person. It was certainly a year of uncertainty and transition for our students, and one we hope we do not need to repeat anytime in the near future. So despite all those challenges, we still have a lot to celebrate in the State of the Division report. Included in the State of the Division report is a link to the Virginia School Quality Profile for Albemarle County. This is a site generated by the State Department of Education that provides a comprehensive look at a wide variety of metrics for the school division, including some that we'll highlight tonight. And if you're ever interested in really digging into what performance looks like in Albemarle County, it's a great source of information both for our division as a whole and for our individual schools. So one of the metrics that we wanted to highlight this year are SOL results from last school year. As we said, many challenges were brought on by the pandemic, including a reduced number of students who participated in end-of-year SOL testing. So both the positive results and our areas for improvement around SOL testing should be viewed through this lens. These challenges, however, were similar in all divisions throughout the Commonwealth, And some bright spots in our performance include that our overall division reading results only dropped by 1 percentage point since the 18-19 school year, which is our last pre-pandemic year that we have SOL data from. That puts us 8 points above the state average of 69%. And you can see that we didn't take nearly as large a drop as the state in our reading scores. Math results, kind of as expected, took a more significant drop in Albemarle County, and they fell 16 points to a 65% pass rate. But that was still a better result and a smaller overall drop than the state of Virginia. So one of the bright spots is that we did not see those drops go as low as they did in other areas of the state, despite the same challenges. Another bright spot in our report is our SAT results. As you all may know, SAT results are reported by graduating cohorts of students. And while significantly fewer members of the class of 2021 took the SAT compared to previous cohorts, the students who did participate greatly outpaced both the state and the nation in our percentage of students who met the College Board's college readiness benchmark, with our division coming in at 87%, the state at 63%, and the national average for that at 56%. In addition to this, our on-time graduation rate came in at 96.5%, and that was the highest we've seen in several years, and 3.5% above the state average. One of the metrics we also look to is the percentage of students receiving advanced studies diplomas as they graduate. Our percentage was 64.4%, well above the state's 52.8%. It's nearly 12 points higher than the state there. And as you heard in a recent update from our Human Resources Department, we are continuing to make progress in hiring a more diverse instructional staff. By hiring 41 teachers of color last year, we had a net gain of 18 teachers of color for the division. Our overall percentage of teachers of color has increased from 10.04% to 11.13% since the 17-18 school year, moving us closer to our goal of having the demographics of our teachers mirror the demographics of our student population. And for several years, we have presented the inequity table to the board. This table helps us to identify disproportionate achievements for students of color, economically disadvantaged students, special education students, and English learners, among others. Moving these numbers is a challenge that takes time, but there are some areas where you can start to see us moving closer to proportionality for our students. Those include the percentage of students who are identified gifted who are economically disadvantaged. You can see that when we started monitoring that metric in the 16-17 school year, we were at 6%. This past year, we were at 12% of those students, economically disadvantaged students, for our percent identified gifted. We looked also at our percent of students earning an advanced studies diploma who are economically disadvantaged, and that number has risen 5 percentage points from 11 in 16-17 to 16 this past year. When we look at our percentage of middle school students who are enrolled in high school math courses who are Hispanic, that number's come up from 5% to 7%. That one wasn't one we started watching until 18-19. So in the past 3 years, we've managed to start to move that. And also our percentage of students who are identified gifted who are Black has come up 2 percentage points from the 16-17 school year to the 2021 school year. Also of note in regard to students who are identified as gifted, board members will likely recall that we've been shifting our focus to a talent development model over the past several years. This model serves all students in the school division by providing opportunities for all students to explore, experience, and identify their unique talents. At our next board meeting in December, you'll be receiving a more detailed update of our talent development program at your business meeting. Finally, each year we ask our graduating class to what degree they feel ACPS prepared them for life after high school. They score each response on a 5-point scale, with 5 indicating that they have a high degree of confidence in that area. Our seniors again affirmed that they felt prepared for life after high school with a score of 3.8. They felt that we had helped them develop a plan for life after high school. That came in at a 4.2. They told us they have the tools they need to succeed in the job market or to continue their education with a score of 4.0. And they told us that they understand their personal strengths interests, and values in possible careers that they might be interested in pursuing. That came in at a 4.2. And while we do have a great deal to celebrate in Albemarle County, we also have a number of areas where we need to continue putting our focus for improvement. While our students who took the SAT did very well, as mentioned earlier, participation rates were down significantly from previous years. Typically, we have over 70% of our graduating seniors complete an SAT, and that number was closer to 25% for the class of 2021. This was due to challenges such as finding open testing centers, and that coupled with many colleges making their applications test optional. This participation rate was particularly pronounced for our Black students and our economically disadvantaged students, who represented only 2% and 1% respectively of our students who took the SAT. The SAT does provide us with valuable insights into our work with students. So to mitigate this trend, we have started to administer the SAT to all 11th grade students free of charge during the school day in the spring of their junior year. We expect to see our participation rates in future years approach 100%. We've removed the barriers of cost, transportation, and weekend timing for our students to help facilitate that. In addition to the SAT scores, we saw a 5-point drop in our pass rate for our advanced placement tests. The feedback we heard from schools and students indicate that the structure we put in place last year with 4 classes in the first semester and 4 classes in the second semester likely impacted both students' participation and results. Because as you recall, many of our high school students took AP courses that ended in January and were not able to take the associated AP test until May. And while anecdotal, we feel that likely impacted both participation and performance. And while our SOL results were higher than state averages, achievement gaps for our students persist, as you can see in this table. Gaps for Black students are 23 points in reading and 29 points in math. For Hispanic students, there's a 30-point gap in both reading and math. For students with disabilities, we have a 28-point gap in reading and a 22-point gap in math. Our economically disadvantaged students have 30 points in both reading, 30-point gaps in both reading and math. And our English learners have a 59-point gap in reading and 44 points in math. Improving these outcomes and closing these gaps is going to be a strong focus for our work with schools this year and into the future. All schools are delivering and analyzing common assessment data to monitor our progress toward raising achievement and closing these gaps. And I hope to come back to the board with a report in March when all of our mid-year assessments have been completed to give you an update on our progress to date this year. And finally, although we have some bright spots in our equity dashboard, we still have a majority of areas where we see inequities for our students. While I won't go into every element of the table tonight, this table is posted in the State of the Division report, and anyone who wants to go in and look at that can see it. And as a reminder of our equity table, to see inequities, you look down this column that shows our the makeup of Albemarle County. We have 6% students who are Asian, 11% who are Black, 15% who are Hispanic, 61% who are white, 6% who are multiple races. As you look across the columns horizontally, if you see these numbers differ from those proportions, there is an inequity, either a positive or a negative inequity for our students. You can see the same thing for students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students, and English learners. I think that a key takeaway from this year's report is that just about everything we report on has been impacted and impacted pretty significantly by the pandemic. And it's time now to look forward, as our title suggests. A key to our next steps is our new strategic plan, Learning for All. As the greater Albemarle County community built this plan last year, a clear focus quickly emerged around equitable outcomes for all students. And I'll end tonight by reminding you of our strategies to move the division forward. It begins with our vision that all learners are engaged in authentic, challenging, and relevant learning experiences, becoming lifelong contributors and leaders in our dynamic and diverse society. And that vision helped to shape our mission, our key goal for the entire plan, that working together as a team, we will end the predictive value of race, class, gender, and special capacities for our children's success through high-quality teaching and learning for all. We seek to build relationships with families and communities to ensure that every student succeeds. We will know every student. That mission will be moved forward by our values of equity, excellence, family and community, and wellness. And it will support our 3 goals of thriving students, affirming and empowering communities, and equitable and transformative resources. Plans are already underway for next year's State of the Division report. And as you know, Learning for All will provide both the roadmap and the metrics and the metric system to show how we are positively impacting education in our division. I want to thank you all for your time tonight, and I would be happy to take any questions or hear any comments you have about this year's State of the Division report.
Dr. McLaughlin, I think the report looks very good, and I think it'll be more accessible and more flexible for people doing research. One of the areas I have to confess I have not focused on as much as I should have is English language learners. And I just wonder if we have sufficient strategies for helping them thrive in our school division.
I think I would say yes, that we do. And quite often we see our English language learners as a bright spot in the division. I do think they were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, right? You know, that typically when we have services for our English language learners, they're really one-on-one. They are about relationship building in person in our schools. And when we're learning over Zoom for a good part of the year, it's very difficult to build those relationships and to mitigate the language barriers that are there. So I agree. There's a disproportionate impact in that in those achievement gaps that we saw last year for our English language learners. Those are one of a group of students that we knew was important to get back into our schools as quickly as we could. And I think with our schools being open 5 days a week this year, we're going to start to see some immediate improvements in those results.
I guess I'm just concerned, for many English language learners, the deficit is beyond language. I mean, language is necessary, but it's not sufficient. They may have significant content gaps as well, as you know better than I. But anyway, I just want us to also focus on that population because it's about, what, 12, 13% of our kids. So we need to raise those scores up too.
Absolutely.
I had 2 clarifying questions before we get into substantive stuff. On the, if you go, the slide that was talking about the percentage of students that took the SAT, and it said, you know, only 1% of our economically disadvantaged students. Is that 1% of our entire student population, of which economically disadvantaged are only 30-something%, or is that only 1% of the 30% of students who are identified as economically disadvantaged?
And one of the things I'm going to do is call on my wingman, Chris Gilman, from our strategic planning department. He is really our expert on all of these stats and can answer that question for us.
That's 1% of the graduating senior class, because that's how they report the data. And so it was a very small number. And the way that they identify economically disadvantaged is a little bit differently than we do. They based it on the reported income of parents as opposed to the actual free and reduced lunch status of students. And so that it varies a tiny bit, and that can impact a little bit of the reporting.
Okay, would you have a hard number for that one, or for the 2% of the Black students, just so I can put a number on? Like, is that like 30 students? I mean, how many students took the SAT? As African American?
It was, I think it was 6 of the graduating class.
Okay. For chronic, thank you. For the chronically absent, I noticed that on the equity dashboard. How did we calculate that last year, given that?
We used the state's formula for chronically absent. So those were, it was still the same way of measuring it. The way that teachers took attendance shifted a little bit, but the category or the formula that we used to calculate that did not shift. And so it was students who were marked absent for an entire school day over 10% of the school days they were enrolled.
Okay. Those are my clarifying questions. I have some other questions later, but I'll let other people speak as well right now.
Dr. McLaughlin, one of the things that I really like in this report, and I continue to really like our equity dashboard for, is while I know it's important to be comparing ourselves to other divisions in the state or the state as a whole and the nation as a whole, it's interesting and sometimes it feels good. And this last year it doesn't feel good. But getting into really comparing ourselves to ourselves is where the rubber hits the road. And there are some things, I mean, I'm looking at the life after school numbers that I think were 3.8, 4, 4.2, and 4 out of 5. That's 76%, 80, 84, 80, 80%. So it's like a mid C, 2 low Bs, and a mid B. And so they're obviously, if you just do it on a percentage basis, based on 5. And so, you know, I really am looking forward to seeing what that's going to become over the next couple of years, because that's one that we can compete against ourselves. But I will tell you that the equity dashboard, and for anybody listening in who's never really paid attention to it, is one of the great tools that the school division has developed, where none of us can run, none of us can hide. It is what it is. And these numbers are not great for this past year, understandably so in many ways. But I love the transparency and the standing up and taking accountability and responsibility. Thank you.
I actually, thanks. I also appreciate the equity dashboard, and I sent this as a message late into the night last night about the equity dashboard, is that I think that, you know, Patrick, the way that you explained it in terms of, you know, when you compare it to the student population, then you can see that there is inequity. But I think that the way that we present that data obscures the magnitude of that inequity. And I am not suggesting that that's purposeful, but I think that that can be an outcome of that. What I did appreciate about this presentation that you gave tonight was that you did have that one slide that showed the actual disparity with like the 77% of reading and whatever, 65% of whatever the math, I think. And then, so you could see really where the big disparities were and truly the magnitude of them. And so I just think that while our equity dashboard does share the type of information and the actual real numbers, and I do appreciate that, I think that when they're calculated based on the whole, and you have to do the math of like, oh, okay, so this is 4%, but there are 7%. So you have to sort of think, you just have to do a lot of backward math to figure out what the true magnitude of the disparity is. So I would put in a pitch for changing it such that we can actually see more easily the magnitude of the inequity.
Thank you. We can look into that in future reports too.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments or concerns about the update?
Yeah, I would just speak up to say I've got concerns. This is not a good, it is a good report, Patrick, in that it is well prepared, and I appreciate that we're transparent. But like Jono said, it makes it so that we can't hide, and I think we need to put that out there openly. This isn't compelling or particularly optimistic to hear tonight. Knowing that we have out of 3 high schools, only 6 Black students that took the SAT is upsetting. That's hard to hear. I feel like I could personally, I feel like if, with as much effort as we're putting in, we're willing to pay for the SAT. We should just, have a class and make it. It's just there's stuff.
Well, just a quick clarification there. That graduating cohort did not have the opportunity where we were paying for their SAT or any of those things.
Okay,
yep.
And I'm trying not to, it's hard because I don't want to diminish the work that we're doing. I know we're working hard. So it would be rude to say, oh, I could go and I could gather up like 10 students and say, you better take the SAT or else. But what I'm trying to get at is that that's hard. That's hard to hear. It's hard to hear that only 1% of economically disadvantaged students are taking the SAT after all the effort that we put in. It's hard to hear that even the progress that we showed, we touted our SAT scores, and then later we say no economically disadvantaged student took it. And we showed the progress, which if you look between the before and after, it is progress, small, but progress, but that's over a 5-year time span on some of those. If we continued at that rate, we would get where we need to be in another lifetime. So, and that's not, and it's hard to say because I know and value all the work that you guys do, and I know how hard we're doing it. I guess want to say here that we aren't hitting the mark. This isn't it. It's not it to say that we've got a 1% increase after 5 years of focus. And that's like the difference between a whole generation getting to go to college and have opportunities and one's being denied it. So that is hard to hear, is all I want to register. And just so that we know the urgency with which we need to tackle these issues. It is not seeing that and saying, we're doing good. It's not, we're not. And me, like, I feel bad personally, like this isn't good. So that's, but I appreciate, I don't know how to say that without also acknowledging and saying that I know you guys are working hard and these are hard problems.
And I think, what we should see within 2 years are those numbers approaching 100% for the SAT, right? We saw that was something that was as concerning to us as I think to you. And so we mitigated those barriers. We took away the cost, we took away the need to do it on the weekend and provide your own transportation. So as we start to look at the class of 2022 and 2023, I promise you are going to see significant improvement in those numbers. That this pandemic year was, as last year's State of the Division report called it, a year unlike any other in terms of just being able to access things like an SAT test.
Well, yes, because so many of the SAT opportunities were just flat out canceled last year. More than half the opportunities in our area were gone. So it's part of this is on lack of opportunity from the College Board position as well. So.
And that's worth noting, but I also want to say it's not all SATs. That was just a striking number to say. Yep. It's like back to the table where we were showing all the metrics and showing growth, and it's growth. So that's good. But I just want to call attention that at that rate, it will be a whole generation that is missed and beyond. So hopefully we can continue with urgency and know that it's important, and it's not, I can't be pleased with numbers like that. That's all.
Patrick, I think it's great that we're going to be offering, removing a lot of the barriers for the SATs, but as you know, many kids get some preparation about what to expect with the SATs and they do much better. So that's just something to think about.
Well, just a quick update on that is that we also give the PSATs to all of our students in 10th and 11th grade. And by taking the PSAT, that opens up free SAT prep, personalized free SAT prep through the Khan Academy for any student with a College Board account. So again, that barrier has been greatly diminished to get that prep, and it's likely, I think, better than the old Kaplan courses that that we used to offer to kids at incredible expense.
Well, thank you. You anticipated my question.
Do we require the PSAT? I mean, do we make sure every student takes it?
Yes, so the one barrier is if they don't show up to school that day is the only reason they wouldn't take it. But every 10th grader and every 11th grader, we get 1 day to take it that's assigned by the College Board, typically in October sometime. And then every 10th and 11th grade student at the school takes it that day.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I just really want to, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Lee.
Oh, I guess I just didn't, not that you are alone in this, Katrina, but I just didn't, I just wanted to voice that it's incredibly sobering. I found it to be very sobering, but I too had that conflict of like, oh, well, I know that we're all working really hard on this, and I know that we're really focused on this, and I know that a lot of people put a lot of great intellectual and emotional work into this, but it is quite sobering. And I know that a lot of it, some of it is COVID, but you know, obviously a lot of the disparity was there prior to that as well.
I agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you see with the COVID-19 is you see the impact that being able to come to school had in the past, that, you know, without the remote learning had some success stories with it, but there's no substitute for being able to attend school and have those opportunities that are right there for the students. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the book that was written by Jim Collins entitled Good to Great. One of the things he talks about in it is the flywheel principle. And the notion behind the flywheel is that it's a very heavy stone wheel that you begin to crank, and it takes an enormous amount of energy, effort, personal resources to get it moving. And as it picks up speed on its own, then it starts to move forward with less effort. I believe that we are getting the right things in place. We have reckoned with the lack of success that we've had with all the students that were obligated, and we have a social contract to be successful with so that they can be successful. We've reckoned with that. And that's a painful reckoning. And having said that, once we reckon, then we can put the things in place. If we choose not to ignore it, which I think we are unique as a college town school system to not ignore these lackluster results. But we are facing them head on. We're putting the effort in, and there will be a time when it begins to accelerate. It will not be 1%, 1%, 1%. It will start to take on a life of its own. As I said earlier, we have over 13,000 students, many of whom are still unemployed in this work. They have not engaged. And when you see our panorama survey results that we recently did, you're going to see another issue that we have is students feeling engaged with school and feeling connected. There's a lot of work to be done, but let's just keep doing it, and we are heading in the right direction. It will start to pick up steam. You will not have to wait an entire generation to see better results in Albemarle County schools.
Thank you, Dr. Haas. And I completely agree with what you are saying. And I also completely agree with what Ms. Carlson and Ms. Lee are saying. I think NISH has ranked Albemarle County in the top 10 school divisions within Virginia, if not nationwide, for at least quite a few years. And we can see that we are doing as a whole system a good job. But when we look at our Black students, our Hispanic students, and our economically disadvantaged students, we can see that we have a completely failing system. So we have a whole lot of work that we need to do, and we can't rest at all. If we really believe in our strategic plan, Learning for All, we have to make sure that we really, really begin to work on this. And we can see some progress being made, but we can't rest on what we have done so far. I completely agree with Ms. Carlson and with Ms. Lee. We really have to make sure that we are working on these things. Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin, for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now move to our fourth quarter update on our unaudited financial report. Mr. Zimmerman is going to come forth with this.
Good evening, school board members. Thank you very much. I want to present for your consideration the fourth quarter financial report. So for the fourth quarter, ending fiscal year 21, the school division finished the year in a very strong financial position. We did have significantly fewer students than were originally projected throughout the year. So just keep in mind is not only did we have the challenges associated with remote instruction and then return to instruction very, very late in the year for a number of our students, but we also had fewer students throughout the year. And that's reflected on our average daily membership numbers that are shown at the top. So we're about 1,000 students fewer than we normally would have. Now, usually in most fiscal years, that 1,000 student decline would also result in a decline in state revenues in particular, because revenues follow students. And as your numbers of students drop, the state revenues decline. That did not take place in this past fiscal year. If you remember, during the General Assembly meeting, they had a number of discussions regarding revenues. Revenues were extremely good for the state. Plus, there were hold harmless provisions brought in by the state for divisions that lost enrollment because the pandemic was hitting a number of school divisions, not just us, very hard in terms of enrollment numbers. So if we take a look at our revenues, we experienced a slight decline in our local school revenues, which we would anticipate for particularly things like athletics and building rentals declining. But we saw a very significant increase in state revenues. There are two reasons behind that. One is very, very strong state sales tax revenues. And the other is the hold harmless provisions for the numbers of kids that are in the division that are attending schools. We anticipated 1,000 additional kids. They provided funding for 1,000 additional kids than we actually had. So we had a rather extraordinary year for state revenues. In fact, sales tax was probably the most extraordinary number that I have ever seen. When we were anticipating a recession, and sales tax was roaringly strong throughout the entire fiscal year. Federal revenues were down very slightly. Overall, what you can see is that we did not need to use any of the budgeted fund balance that we actually had originally budgeted to end up with revenues that exceeded our original appropriation by almost $1 million, by over $1.4 million. In terms of expenditures, pandemic was very, very difficult to estimate expenditures. Overall, our compensation was about 2.5% lower than originally budgeted. And when you consider that our compensation and benefit packages represent more than 85% of our total dollars, 2.5% is a significant amount of money. Almost $4.3 million saved in compensation and benefits over the entire fiscal year. Large portion of that was due to some pandemic issues associated with hiring is one part. Other part is we didn't have enormous numbers of overtime, nor substitutes, nor part-time work that we would normally have in a year in which we would operate in person. We only operated a very short time in person. We also had significant savings in operational accounts. You look down here, we had about almost $4 million in operational savings. Again, not operating schools during this time period, not running buses during an extremely large portion of this time period, inability to get things that were ordered because of supply chain issues during this time period. So we had some significant savings in terms of our overall operational accounts. And so when you look at our overall operations and revenues in compensation, we ended the year in an extremely positive way. $9.6 million revenues over expenditures. And if we take a look at how this affected our ending situation at the end of the fiscal year, if we look at our 18-19, we started 18-19 with a $4.5 million available fund balance. We increased our fund balance from in 19-20. And so fund balance as of June 19, we were $9.5 million. Almost 9.6. We had estimated salary savings, a lapse factor savings, in essence, of almost 4.3, the additional revenues, the additional operational savings. Now, if you remember during last fiscal year, we did transfer a significant chunk of money over to our CIP for some of the CIP projects that were on our list to get accomplished. So we moved $4 million of our fund balance over to the CIP. Right now, there's an audit adjustment of about $56,000. So overall, with our calculated June 30, 2021 fund balance, it's about $15.2 million. Now, when we look at that initial $15.2 million, we have programmed more than a third of it already. You remember the board has taken carry forward of prior year purchase orders of just under $400,000. It did an appropriation of fund balance for Mountain View to address some overcrowding issues associated with Mountain View. And we did originally budget $5.2 million of fund balance in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. So our projected available fund balance for 21-22, just at this point, we are still undergoing audit, so we're still in the midst of the audit process, is $8.6 million. If you take a look at our FY 21-22 school fund appropriation, we're at $214 million. And so if we look at the 2% fund balance that's set by the Board of Supervisors, that would be just under $4.3 million that we would have available to us in this process. So that's a brief and quick overview of fiscal year 21 in terms of our financial performance, which is extremely strong. And it puts us in good stead for our fiscal year 21-22 first quarter report that will be coming up next. But otherwise, I'd be happy to receive any questions regarding fiscal year 2021. Otherwise, I would ask the board to receive the fourth quarter fiscal year report for 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. Could I have a motion to receive the report that has just been delivered?
I move that we receive the financial report as presented by Mr. Zimmerman.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Oberg, second by Ms. Lee, that we receive the report that Mr. Zimmerman has given to us. Ms. Johnston, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Acuff?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro?
Yes.
Ms. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Oberg?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Page?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Report is received. All right, so there are questions or discussion on this. Any questions for Mr. Zimmerman?
All right, thank you, board members.
Report,
I'll present for the board's consideration the fiscal year 21-22 first quarter financial report.
Okay.
We're just starting the fiscal year when we're looking at this. This financial report runs from July through September. And so we just have a snapshot of our expenses during this time period. This is going to be the first year in a while in which we've started off the year with a full set of operations and a full set of students. We are still under hold harmless provisions from the state. So in terms of the numbers of students that come in, it will not affect state revenues. So state revenues will be relatively flat during this time period, at least in terms of what's planned, regardless of the numbers of students that are either increased or decreased. We still do anticipate some lower school revenues, local revenues than we had originally budgeted. But we think that there will be some additional discussion during the General Assembly in which there will be potentially new revenues coming from the state because the state revenues are at historic levels. And we also have heard that local revenues are extremely strong as well, county revenues. And we do think that in terms of the revenue picture, that our overall revenues are very likely to be strong for this current fiscal year. If we take a look at our expenditures for this fiscal year, our expenditures we anticipate to be very similar as to what we've had in the past. Probably better expenditures, probably still fairly strong savings in terms of our overall compensation and benefits, probably not as strong as what we saw during the height of the pandemic, because we are returning back to school and we did hire more staff, but we're still having some difficulties in terms of hiring staff. So it is very likely that we will see some compensation savings during this fiscal year. In terms of our overall operational savings, we still do have pandemic-related delivery issues in the division. So we may see some savings in those areas as well. So overall, right now, with this snapshot of just the first 3 months of operation for the division, we do think that we're going to be very, very strong in this fiscal year. We do have a very strong fund balance. If you look on the last sheet, it's basically a repeat of what you've seen in the fiscal year 2021 fund balance report. We do have a very strong fund balance, but we're probably also going to have a very good fiscal year this current fiscal year. And I believe if there are any questions, I'd be happy on fielding these questions. Otherwise, I was going to turn this over to Dr. Haas. He had some recommendations, I believe, to make to the board from this financial report.
So thank you very much, Jackson. Okay. I really appreciate all the work.
Yes.
Oh, did you have a question?
Could we accept this report also before we get your recommendation?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So could I have a motion to accept the first quarter financial report?
I move that we accept the first quarter financial report as presented by Mr. Zimmerman.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Lee, second by Mr. Alcaro, that we accept the first quarter financial report. Any discussions on the motion? If not, Ms. Johnston.
Yes. Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Oberg?
Yes.
Ms. Lee?
Yes.
Dr. Acuff?
Yes.
Mr. Alcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Page?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carried. Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Haas.
All right, please excuse me, Mr. Page. I didn't mean to jump in front of you there. Sorry about that. So thank you, Jackson, and thank you for all the work you did to produce the information for the board tonight. Mr. Page, based on the health of our finances, I'd like to recommend the following to the board. In light of the fact that our employees have been and are going above and beyond the call of duty during a very challenging time, and they are facing many challenges of their own, including the highest increase in inflation in 30 years that we've seen. I'm recommending to the school board that we provide a one-time payment in December for all staff members in the amount of $1,000 to all regular staff from 1 FTE to 0.7 FTE, and $750 for all regular staff that work less than 0.7 FTE. To be eligible, I recommend that employees must be employed before November 30th, 2021, and receive a December 2021 paycheck. I am certain that such a payment will signal to our workforce how much they are appreciated and how valuable their presence and their work with our students, families, and each other are to their community.
Thank you. Board members, we've heard Dr. Haas's recommendations to the board.
I move that we direct staff to provide a one-time payment for all regular staff members in the amount of $1,000 to all regular staff from 1 FTE to 0.7 FTE and $750 for all regular staff that work less than 0.7 FTE. Employees must be employed before November 30th, 2021 and receive a December 2021 paycheck. And after making my motion, I will say that I think this is not only appropriate from a morale circumstance, from an inflation standpoint, but because we are changing the way paychecks are going as a result of our filing in the county. My hope is that this will help ease some of that pain, because it will be a pain for some of our employees with that change. So.
Is there a second to Mr. Oberg's motion? Was that Ms. Lee?
Yes, sorry, I jumped the gun on that. Second.
No problem. Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Oberg, second by Ms. Lee, that we accept Dr. Haas's recommendation and that we give all of our employees making certain qualifications or meeting certain qualifications a raise. Any discussion on that motion?
I would like to echo Mr. Oberg's comments after he made his motion. I think this is a positive on many different fronts for all of the affected staff, and I support this wholeheartedly.
Other discussion?
Just with the qualification, Mr. Page, that it's not a raise, it's a one-time payment.
Right, a one-time payment, one-time bonus. And like Mr. Oberg is saying, and also Mr. Alcaro, not really maybe enough, but it's really showing our staff, all of our staff, how all of our employees, how much they are really treasured. So it's not often that we can give them some financial benefits, but we really do treasure the work that you're doing. Any other comments? If not, Ms. Johnston.
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Ms. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Mr. Page.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. So again, we are so pleased that due to this great financial report, we're able to give our employees a bonus. We are now ready for our next agenda item. Our FSBA policies and regulations. Ms. Osborne and Mr. Alcaro will lead us in this.
Yes, so as a member of the Virginia School Boards Association, we get a say in their legislative priorities, and you saw those in your packet. They are not controversial this year, and having read through them and talked with Helen Dunn about it, they seem like things that we would want to agree with and support. I'm wondering if you guys have read through them and if you have any questions. A lot of them are language-based things like changing terminology from internships and apprenticeships, calling those work-based learning, things like that that aren't going to have a much effect.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Osborne or Mr. Alcaro on the regulations?
I think it's fair to say that Ms. Osborne and I agree and support all of these.
Okay. Could I have a motion?
I move that we approve the VSBA policies and regulations as reviewed by Mr. Alcaro and Ms. Osborne for the VSBA Delegate Assembly next week, I guess.
It'll be Monday.
Monday.
Monday, okay. Is there a second to Dr. Acuff's motion? Is there a second? Okay, Ms. Lee, thank you. All right, so it's been moved and properly second that we will approve the regulations presented by Ms. Osborne and Mr. Alcaro. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Ms. Johnston.
Mr. Alcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Oberg,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Acuff,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Page,
Yes,
motion carries.
motion carries. All right, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the Sustainability Advisory Committee. This report will be given to us by Dr. Acuff and Vice Chair Carlson.
I guess I will start with this. Colleagues, I think you may remember that in February, on our February 13th, 2020 meeting, this board approved the establishment of an advisory committee on sustainability. And charged Ms. Carlson and me to develop the substance of that committee. I have to confess that it fell by the wayside through much of the pandemic, but we have once again met with both Rosalind Schmidt and Lindsay Snoddy on this, and we have a proposal to establish the committee, which we will, unless there's an objection, call ACES, the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability. And that committee would be modeled substantially like our long-range planning committee is modeled. The mission will be largely to look at the very key areas where we can make an environmental impact in our buildings, our buses, and the education of our students and staff. It will be to coordinate with the county, which has just approved its climate action plan. And Ms. Snoddy has already reached out to Gabe Daly, who is the point person for compliance to the county's environmental plan. And he's willing to be a member of the committee. And we would also have a commitment to work with more broadly with regional partners such as UVA. As it turns out, UVA, the sustainability specialist at UVA, without prompting, reached out to me this week to talk about, to advise about a conference that I went to, webinar on net zero schools. And so that's a whole topic. But we would propose that we work to reduce, to track or work to have our own guidepost in terms of environment sustainability. But it would require, well, why don't you do the mechanics of it, Ms. Carlson?
Yeah, so in terms of the composition of the advisory committee, what we were thinking, unless there are objections, is that every school board member would appoint a representative to the board, presumably somebody that has a specialty, which will be written in the thing, somebody who has a specialty in environmental sustainability practices. There will also be 3 department representatives selected by the superintendent, with the idea that those will probably be from the 3 main kind of areas, transportation, building services, and child nutrition, where we have a lot of our issues coming up. Although that's not set in stone, it will just be 3 appointees. We are looking to have 1 student member selected, hopefully to give our students some real-time exposure and practice, and potentially let them do some advocacy in the high schools. And then we'll have a representative from the Board of Supervisors, which I think, well, Diantha McKeel has already volunteered for that, but maybe they'll select someone. We'll have a representative from the school board, so one of us will hopefully be able to sit in on these meetings. And then, who am I missing? That's basically it, but we have it all typed up and you'll be able to read it. But Kate and I wanted to get it in front of you because once we get it posted, we want to get it posted so we can start getting applications in, so that come the beginning of the year, you will have applicants who you can look through so that we can get people appointed. I can actually just paste in our composition paragraph that we have written into the chat so you guys can read through it. But does anyone have any concerns or questions or about how we're thinking of to compose it? And we want them to report to the superintendent, but also provide an annual report to us so that we have oversight over kind of what's going on. Thoughts?
Thank you, Ms. Carlson and Dr. Acuff. Thoughts, questions? Ms. Carlson, you
Thank
did
you
say
very
that it
much
would
for
be
taking that
written,
on.
or has it already been written, or is it going to be written and posted for us?
It's been substantially written with some, so Kate and I have met, and we met twice with Lindsay and Rosalind. It's been substantially written. I think there's some minor things pending y'all's feedback, but in essence, what we told you is the thing.
Right.
So if you have things,
we should be able to have a final draft of that document by Monday, I would say.
Okay. Ms. Carlson has already posted it in the chat box, right? Or at least part of it.
the composition part, in case anybody
right,
had any
right.
questions about that. But we did quite a lot of back and forth about what was the ideal number, how many student reps, and there's been a lot of conversation and thoughtful dialogue around why we want to do it like this, although we're obviously open to suggestions if you have them.
Are there any
We
suggestions?
didn't do it 5 minutes ago. I didn't call Kate 5 minutes ago and say, let's come up with.
No, I mean, I would be interested in what our student rep would think about we talked about whether to have a student rep from each of the schools. That started to feel unwieldy, or every 3 months, and that sounded like you wouldn't get your teeth sunk into the issue. But any input would be welcome, David.
Sure. I think the longer terms make sense. They can probably get more involved with an actual issue and maybe do something practical, substantial. But I think the more variation in students, the better. I mean, getting greater diversity of the students is going to get you different perspectives. So I think doing one from each school might make sense. And I think it just depends on the size of the board to actually decide. But I think a longer term and the more students, the better.
Thank you, David.
So I will say on just the selling, the marketing, Kate and I are really excited. I hope you guys are as well. Just even having a conversation with Kate, myself, Rosalind, and Lindsay, it was really exciting to think of the various things we can do to tackle sustainability and improve our climate impact, which if you remember, we were that was one of our lowest scores when we had the consulting agency look at our schools. I mean, I'll just throw out, Lindsay had this great idea, which the ACES committee, the ACES will hopefully be able to evaluate and see if it's good or not. But she said, you know, we definitely have teachers that are passionate about the environment in each of our schools. And for example, we have composting. I know we've got a presentation on composting, but there's not always high compliance with composting. It really takes, she said, a teacher who's willing to stand there, especially in the beginning of the school year, for a few weeks and kind of teach students, how do you separate your stuff so that it can be composted correctly? And she was saying, which I think is neat, we should look at if we can do a bonus, just like we offer for coaches or people who are taking on extra things. It would give our teachers a chance to take ownership over something and increase their money and their salary and get to do something that they're probably passionate about anyway. So anyway, that was a great idea. I'm excited about the work that they're going to do. So appreciate the board's support on it.
The sustainability director at UVA sent me another email today and well, her kids went to, I think, Greer. I don't know where they are in the progression now, but she said we have done as a school division a lot in terms of sustainability already, and that I think most people are unaware of what we have done, and that she suggested perhaps having, town halls or school meetings or I have to reread her, but something to sort of see where we are as a baseline and then start working toward making some improvements. But I think there's a lot of activities we can do, but the next step is establishing this committee and get it rolling. And I'm excited that after this long pause, we are ready to go.
Thank you too for bringing our ACE's committee report to us. If there are no objections, we could put this on the consent agenda for our next meeting. Are there any objections to that? Hearing none, the ACE's committee report will be on our consent agenda for our December 2nd meeting.
I do ask as a point of clarification for Jennifer, and Kate, perhaps this is on your mind as well. So if we have general approval for it, and we can send you out the document, in terms of just posting something to the website so we can start at least getting some applications, it will still be open all throughout, even after we get through the consent. But I think the more time we can give people to apply and express interest, the better. Is that possible? Dave, you're a procedural guy.
Yeah, it's not a problem as long as I would term it in terms the school board is planning to.
Okay. So that would be the goal then, is to get it posted as soon as possible, and then we can approve it in final form in the December meeting.
Okay.
Just one more issue I would raise to the board and get input. We have a student representative on the school board, but it is not a voting member. And this for the advisory committee, I mean, I think if it's a voting member, then suddenly having 4 students, if we want more representation, that is a different dynamic than if we have 1 voting member, or maybe it would be better not to have the student as a voting member. I would love input on that.
I'm just going to object to the extent that we're going to be doing a committee of the whole on something. I don't think this is the appropriate forum.
My input would, we can leave it, I think, substantially similar to how we have it for now, which is 1 student rep. And if they decide it could be something different there, they work out if that one student rep wants to be the liaison for other students. I don't know, but that I think can be worked out later.
Okay. All right. So we are in agreement then that it will be on the consent agenda for December meeting, the first meeting in December, correct? All right, moving to our next item then. Is there any other business by our board members or by the superintendent? Any other business? Last call. If not, our meeting for November 11th is adjourned, and we thank everyone who participated and gave us reports of any kind, and also any of our listeners who listened in tonight. So thank you all.
Good night,